Hi there, Randy Green here, and welcome to the HAL Template Science course 2, where we are doing the transition, technically speaking. And I have not deliberately, but will choose this day to do this course material because today is the day where I am technically doing the transition. And why is that? What date is it today? It is the 22nd of June, 2022. And to those of you who are up to the whole number thing, you will kind of calculate that we had the 22nd of February 2022. That was a significant kickstarting of the year. Then we had the 22nd of April 2022 on, and then the number 4 and 2022, and now we are having in June, so it follows the sequences of twos where we have significant changes. But there are all rules that goes with the number 3 because we are in a trinity system. So this is the peak and it is the solstice as well. So that is the peak of this year, and everything here will just begin to go into decline. So what is so special about this solstice this year? I can't really say why that is. I could come up with different type of cycles, which I will, and that is definitely a huge part of it. But we have also had a lot of prolonging and relooping, so we don't really know what year it is in. But there are some old games and some old rules that have been put in play when we were hijacked 15,000 years ago and put into action, complete action 12,000 years ago. And then as we know, those of you who were part of the stellar activation cycle, you know that it was talked about that when Atlantis fell, there were groups that plotted for the stellar activation cycle to be able to redo and undo what they didn't got done back then. So in this introduction here on page 3, I will go a little bit into history so we kind of get the context of the transition as I see it with the information I have got today. And there I will also explain a little bit more about what is the transition actually and who has, sorry about that, been able to do it this time around, and who will get their second and final chance next time the horn is sounding, and what is that and what does that mean? Okay. On the first 3 pages, we have the usual sum up diagrams, which you know from the whole transition science classes where they have been explained over and over and over again. So I'm just keeping them there. So it is to remind you the reality we are part of the domains and the grids and networks, because these are terminology that I am using constantly. And if you should forget it, you have the first 3 pages to look at, and then the transformative energy system, which is what you should achieve with your energy work and your activation processes. Because what is the activation? It is a cleanup process. And what is it? And this is those of us who were part of the activation cycle and studied the material there, and the ones that were speaking from the different humanoid races, what they were saying, they were only saying activation, but they didn't say cleanup. And that is where I feel a triggery kind of played in. But as always, those who know, they know, and those who don't know, they will get the chance in the teachings. And if they don't activate by that level and begin to do the cleanup on their own, they will not have the viability in their genetics to be able to do the transition and transfer into the viable timelines anyway. So this is part of the sadness of this, is that those who know, they will move on. Those who don't know will get different chances, 3. And if they don't follow these warning signs where things are happening in the reality field, and that comes from within, can never be taught, because only the ones that have the ability to see, to hear, and to understand will hear these horns. And what are these horns? They're part of the original construction. So let us go a little bit back in history. The construction, as you know, were built. I talked about that in the whole transition science classes, so you got the information there. But it's all about what this solar system were made for, to unify the humanoid and human races, to build the gap between the laggards and the ones that were ready to move on. That's the beginning point of all our history. There we divided. The humanoids decided to use technology, and they built this LPU, less progressive universal matrix structure, artificially built upon different types of technologies, contrary to the original true elevation cycles that are purely and entirely built upon energy and consciousness to develop life force. But their humanoid worlds were built to be able to activate and do the ascension, getting them ready to do the elevation. So that's the purpose of the LPU. The purpose of the progressive worlds are, of course, to progress and evolve, but it's kind of done naturally through the laws and the principles and the rules and all the things I've been teaching so far. So that's also why I will do this course saying, okay, we still need to do the progressive dynamics, but we are in a mechanically driven matrix system where we will have technological assistance, but only for the ones that are following the original progression dynamics. And that's kind of the merge between the technologically driven worlds and the progressive worlds. So that those who relied entirely on the mechanical means, they will go into the transhuman worlds or fail completely and fall into the devastation cycles. Those who relied on the progression dynamics alone would either make it and doing the complete transfiguration, which means evaporate and cease to exist, but in a transmutation process where nothing will be transferred other than the viable genetics. And that is not really up anymore due to the high level of fall dynamics as well as technologically enhanced genetics that we're having on this planet, as well as in the solar system, as well as in this galactic sector. So with that, we need to understand that we must bridge both the sciences and the technologies and the original progression dynamics to be able to do that trinity of elevation that will get us out of here. Okay, the original construction, as you know, I talked about that in the whole philosophy book, which I made in 2020, which were what we could call the last call from the councils to do it the original ways, trying to assist humanity in the original progressive ways, which led to a complete, what we call finger, to put it mildly, from the whatever remained of the humanoid races. The solar rishis could not, had no control of their groups. And it ended up with the Dracos that were part of the hijacking, the top of the hijacking pulled out and let everything fall into the hands of what was left of the Dark Avatar Collective. So that's kind of what that led to, and that led to the true human councils pulling out what was left of the viable genetics in the upper level of our templates and closing down the library, and initiated the sequences that would lead to the closing down of our solar system. That happened in 2020. But what are the default mechanisms I talked about in the whole philosophy book? In the whole philosophy book, I talk about how constructions, if they reach a certain level of what we call fall state or devastation dynamics or crystallization, or in our case, had too high level of infection, which is why we modified it already back in the times after the timeline event. We reconstructed the construction to be able to deal with the damages that the timeline event had done. And that pushed us further into the third cycle, unfortunately. But the process with the transformative energy system was still to undo the effects of the timeline event and transfer and transmute or evaporate our genetics that no longer held any viability. There we changed foundationally the rules of the game. But to be able to warn off systems that were hit by the timeline event, we reconstructed the constructions to give a series of warnings so that people would know this is it. You are reaching the default minimum. And if you don't turn around and do what you need to do now, then the construction will begin its default mechanism, resetting, and be pulled out and shut everything down. And what is left will be pushed into the devastation cycle. These are the horns. They are warning horns. They are put in, interestingly enough, in the Gospels, in the Christian terminology, as well as probably also in the Islamic, as well as in other forms of Abrahamic deviations of that type of religion, goes with the lunar races. As Gabriel's horn, that's the first one that sounds. And that sounded in 1999, but we have had it before, those of us who remember. During the times of Lemuria, we had the three horns calling. We had it in the times of Atlantis, and we have it now. So what was Lemuria? We actually technically also had it with what we call on Gaia, or the first Earth, but that one was so consumed by the timeline event energy. So what was left of viability there were pulled out into the seventh dimension, where it is, I talked about that in the perception logs, where we have this weird world of the original Gaia and worlds that were part of the 1-7 pillar, and they are in all ways and forms very Android. I don't really know if it's to be trusted or not. I'm still figuring that one out. But that is the 1-7 pillar that we will, as you will see on page 4, we will work our way through from 2035 to 2043. And that's part of the transhuman agenda. That's part of the last division of humanity. But what is one with the horns? Okay, in Lemuria, the second cycle, 2-8 cycle that turned into this dark, weird stuff, Lemuria was to play out the 2-8 pillar. Then we had in the second cycle, then we had the Atlantis that were the 3-9 pillar, or the third cycle, that were going from dimension 3 until dimension 9 with the purpose of reconnecting us to Andromeda. The 2-8 pillar were about the original Venusian races that were supposed to link back up to the Orion system. So that goes with that. That's the part of the Lemurian agenda. But there were other stuff going on as well. The true human races had their Jupiterian or their Jovian colonies here. So there was a lot of stuff going on. But the main theme of the pillars follows the cycle. So pillar 1-7, first cycle, pillar 2-8, second cycle, pillar 3-9, third cycle. But they also go with pillar 1-7 is technically the biological level that learns to work with the template, architecture, energy system, everything that goes with that on a personal level. Pillar 2-8 is where you learn to work with these within a community where others become important. And pillar 3-9 is where you begin to work with your reality field, again, using what you have learned in your dynamics. They also follow with pillar 1-7 biofield, pillar 2-8 cycle 2, vibrational field, pillar 3-9, cycle 3, the radiation field. So you see how these things are nicely and neatly put together, braided in as a trinity of things that are to be learned. So this is why when we're kind of having the phases where we already had the universal activation cycle, I don't know when that ran, but we have already had it. That's why the universal structure itself had reached this default and began its activation and cleanup, from where all that was viable were pulled out, transferred back into the original or higher levels of the humanoid worlds to begin with, and the rest were put back into the true human worlds where it actually belonged under the ancient ones. We had the galactic activation cycle that we also know has ended. Now it ended completely in 2017 with the dark galactic core that got activated. That was the last stages of that. That kickstarted what we technically understand as the planetary activation cycle, but not completely. There were a time gap where we could have changed things and tried to turn things around. There are always these overlap. So in 1999, we had the stellar activation cycle that kicked in, and that ran until 2021, as we know, and then again the overlap. And if we had made it, then we would have avoided the planetary activation and cleanup cycle. But in 2007, 8 years after the horns had sounded in 1999, it was a fact humanity had not got the lessons learned by the stellar activation, the science classes that were given in different ways and forms, already been prepared throughout the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and nobody really kicked in and did what they were supposed to do because, as I said, the teachers were in many ways flawed because people were so far behind that they wouldn't be able to grasp the levels of the information that were given, and unfortunately given as downloads to few teachers that had the ability to transfer the information into graphics and illustrations and understandings, which again were only given to selected people around the planet that had old Atlantean roots, because technically the stellar activation cycle were all about the Atlanteans and the humanoids. The planetary activation cycle, on the other hand, are the true humans. So this is, again, where it kind of goes in different stages and in different phases with different groups that are to activate. So we had the 3 horns in Lemuria, where we first got the highest level, the radiation level, that were kicked in, that ran in a 23-year cycle. You say, well, isn't it 21? Is that the number? Yes, but you have the year before we enter into it and you have the year after, so that's up to 23. And then we had the same 3 horns, again sounding the 3rd cycle, when Atlantis had reached its minimum requirement state of viability before shutting down. And then we are having it now in the 4th cycle. It has sounded now for the 4th cycle. So what happens? First and foremost, again, with this whole number of things, it's not an exercise in mathematical calculation, but in 1999, we had the first horn sounding on the radiation level, telling people this is now where you need to begin to change your life and do what you need to do, because this system is officially shutting down. And that was the stellar activation cycle. So that was, of course, the 3rd cycle that goes with Atlantis. The 2nd horn is about the 2nd cycle, which is what we are entering into now with the 2-8 pillar, as well as the planetary or the other level of other humans. That is, when we work with the 3-9, we're working about the holographic grids and networks and the energetic levels and all of these features I've talked about other places, which we again will pay attention to later on in this course. So that was kind of where those of us who had the ability to clean up our timelines and the connection to the humanoid worlds did so. That was the first horn. Get ready. In 1999, I got this. Get ready. This system is closing down. Did I know what the horn was? Absolutely not. I just got, this is Gabriel's horn, and I just felt something significant were happening and I had to do something. So what did I do in 1999? Well, I left my husband and my child behind. I left my home. I left my job. I left everything. And technically I lived from hand to mouth for a period of time. And then I thought to myself, perhaps that was not the right strategy, but I followed the sound of the horn and I got ready to do something. I needed to do some kind of exodus. I just didn't know what it was. So I went back to my husband because I had left my daughter there. That was a bad decision. So I went back, stayed with him for a while until I figured out, okay, what is it actually I need to do here? And why did I leave him the first time? Because not a happy marriage, but things had just gotten to a head and I just ran, to put it that way. And running is not the right decision. So I went back and settled things, and then began planning a little bit better. And I knew this time I have to get my daughter with me. This is the important thing, not getting a new home or what have you, because at the time I said I left my job. Technically, I was working as a cleaner lady in the middle of the night. So it was difficult for me to juggle the balls with an infant and then get up 3 o'clock at night and go to work. So that's one of the reasons why I left her behind. But I also had convinced myself, because my husband was one of these Y chromosome mental dark snake infused being. So he had definitely convinced me that I was not suitable as a mom and she would be better off with him, which I believe to be the truth. But I could see whenever I saw my daughter every second weekend, I could see she was falling apart and my heart just broke. And I just thought to myself, that was not the right decision. So I wanted to give our marriage a second chance. So I went back and tried to make it work, and he was happy and we were all happy for around 3 months. And then I just, yeah, I had to go. But this time I planned it better. And I got her with me this time, so that was good. And I got my things in order. I didn't have any place to live to begin with, but I had my daughter with me. So that was the difference. First time around, I had a place to live and I had a job, but I didn't have my daughter. Second times around, I had my daughter, but I had no income and I had no place to live. So that was kind of swapping things around. But I had good people helping me and I trusted the process because I knew, yes, and this time I got the right thing with me. This is the right prioritization. I prioritized correctly. I took what was in my heart and what was important in my heart and not the materialistic goods. That was the test. First, I went from the materialistic path, as in securing myself with home and money, and left behind my heart with this dark force of a husband. He's a nice guy in all ways, but he has a dark energy system. So again, this is not about how they necessarily are. Of course, it bled through from time to other, and in arguments, he was a bastard. But I did that one later on when I recounted similar type of male structure later on, actually between 2017 and 2018, where I finalized my stay with a similar kind of structure and similar type of darkness and even 10 times worse type of darkness. And I prevailed. I succeeded. I took the battles and I won every time with where I failed with my husband. That only took me some 18 years to fulfill that heart cycle with dealing with the dark forces in the male form and learn to be strong in facing the black dragon, as it's called, and draw the sword and chop off the head and evaporate its dark galactic core black hole heart of nothingness. So that was, to use an analogy, so that only took me 18 years to learn. Anyway, so that's part of the heart cycle and I say heart cycle because the first step is about leaving the materialistic world and listen to your heart. That's the first horn that turns you away from the outside and should turn you to the inside, where you learn to choose correctly. And that is not the matter of the physical form and the real world out there, the artificial construction, but the matters of the heart. And the heart goes with the vibrational field, and the vibrational field goes with the timelines and cleaning up everything we have connected ourselves to because of wrongful choices, because we have got involved emotionally, or what you would call in different forms of vibrational levels, with energies that we should have learned to cut loose and let go of, but had not learned the lesson before the timeline event, as we got more and more entangled into the humanoid worlds. And there are good reasons why they could not do the elevation processes and why it was so important for us to sacrifice ourselves so we could help them, which was, of course, the complete wrong choice. We should never have gotten involved in the less progressive universal structures and the humanoids. They should have just been cut loose to do their own thing. And then the rest of us should have moved on as it rightfully were. Already there, we made our first big transgression and went against the original rules of these universal cycles. So that's the top lesson to be learned. What should be taken with you and what should be left behind? And you can say a child is an innocent, and she was, if she had been a dark being, I would not have returned for her, but she was not. She is, and still was back then, a light being, and I had to take her with me from the darkness. So that was the test that went with those of us who went into the LPU. We did so because we saw there was still viability, and that's why we did what we did, but to a great cost, which I also learned the years after my divorce. I got my daughter with me and I fought for her, and I learned that was the only thing I should prioritize in life. That was her and her well-being and her growth potentials and her becoming a human that would master this world to the best of her abilities, which she has become. So that became my sole purpose. Everything else, which is glitter that were put around that main project. So that is where I took the activation of my heart field, engaging myself into another human being in spite of not having maternal instinct or maternal feelings whatsoever, because I'm a fifth cycle human, actually going further up. So that's not part of me, but I took that obligation replaying the LPU and what we got involved in, replaying that with my child, and did everything I needed to do, cut loose what was not supposed to be there, and at the same time, slowly but surely got myself arranged, learned to be more strategic, learning to grow up. Literally, when you are 28 and 30, you are still a child in so many ways. So after the divorce, when I was 31, I began to mature. I began to grow up. I grew out of my childish, infantile ideas of what reality was, and learned the hard way that life sucks, life is hard, and life is all about suffering, and life is all about mastering this suffering, and then figure out how the fuck to pay the bills, be a good mom, and at the same time do what you have to do to activate yourself. So that's the process I went through in that order. So with that, I went in, and in 2007, when the sun began its activation, shut down processes, I activated further, because that's where the releaser was activated in me, because I was not supposed to be a mom. I was not supposed at all to be on this planet, as you know, but due to the original dynamics of our construction, the construction called for me. Mother called for me and told me there are certain things you need to do which goes with your original architecture, so you better get to work. And in 2007, I got this next activation sequence. There I had already begun doing my own business. I was healing. I was helping people. I got my central and peripheral nervous system activated. I was at the time working with humanoids, because we are in the LPU, right? And I am true human. I came here to assist the humanoids. Bad decision, but I did. Again, replaying my own history, because that's part of the different activation cycles. You replay your history so you can undo your mistakes, whether it's universal, galactic, stellar, planetary, or on the human level. You replay your own ancient history, reviewing everything, evaluating everything, and then clean up whatever is no longer viable. And you're looking at it without shame, but with clear sight and clear eyes, knowing this needs to be cleaned up. You remember in 1992, I think it was, I got the wake up call, as in wake up, you're drowning in all of your emotional mess, so you better wake up. And that dream was, as you know from other places, I was dreaming that I was on the ocean on a mattress, and of course it sank and I sank with it. And as I hit rock bottom of the deep ocean, I was awoken with a very clear voice jolting me, literally my heart felt jolting me as doing CPR, and then just wake up and see things as they truly are. You are drowning, and if you don't do what you need to do now, you will never make it. So therefore, that's the kick in that came. Again, pretty sure from Mother, that got me jolted, because she knows her original constructors, because I have been part of re-engineering her. So she found me, she recognized me, and she kickstarted me. And again, Mother is highly, highly advanced type of augmented consciousness structure. Okay, so built into the construction. Not AI, never AI. Okay, so with this one, we are here saying, okay, in 2007, the releasing work began, because to be able to get me back on track, I needed to understand the game, and Mother decided that being a releaser was the best way to teach me what was going on here. So with that, sending all things my way, getting the symbols into me, so everything on all timelines and all cycles within the original Pillar project that I had connections to were sent my way, so I could activate them and release them and send them back out as it were originally constructed with the LPU. If that project would fail, the true humans of the original worlds, that's why I went in, would be here. The first shall be the last, as you remember, that we would be here, and then let everybody out and put them back where they were supposed to have gone anyways in the beginning, before the division. So that was to complete that grand cycle of that, and that's where we are now. So with that work, I've been doing that since 2007, and my hope is now that with the second horn that has sounded today, transferring me and those of us who did hear the first horn and got ready, got things activated on the heart field level and got ourselves unentangled from the different fold cycles, the stellar activation levels of the networks and the grid works that were activated, and plummeted into the fold cycles as viability were pulled out of it. And that's part of the activation, stellar activation cycle. Everything on a humanoid level that could be transferred were transferred between 2000 and 2021 in the stellar activation cycles. That's what that was about. It was, as in it said, it was about ascension, but it was never said, those of you who doesn't make it, well, bad for you, you will be plummeted into the full cycles. But at the same time, what was not said either was that viable genetics, due to the law of energetic and genetic affinity, will be pulled out and returned to their original timelines in the closing up cycles, as an activation stellar cycle technically is, or a stellar activation and cleanup cycle. It's a close-up cycle. So 3 months ago, 2 months ago, 1 month ago, I don't know. I have no concept of time. When you ask me when did that happen, I don't know, because things are just on a different level of reality where there is no time. But a while back, the solar and the stellar activation cycle ended and the solar wishes pulled out. That was the end of the LPU project, finalized. Everything was released, and whatever's left now is only what is of the darkness of the first, second, and third cycle in the networks and the racial grids of our planet. And that's where the minimum requirements have been reached on a planetary level. And it has been going on very strong since 2018, with both AI from the third cycle, underworld forces from the second cycle, and elemental creatures from the first cycle, that has done everything they could to surface and get into humans. And with that one, consuming what was left of light, of viable genetics connected to the physical form. And they have grown exponentially stronger year by year. And we had the whole Afghanistan thing going on with the Americans pulling out, which was the right thing to do, but that plummeted that area, that gate system, into the darkness that they had technically tried to prevent from happening. But since they already got that their own version activated in 2001 in the 9/11 event, they were not really the right ones to secure keeping the gate closed. And of course, they failed in that one. It should have been other groups that had done so. Anyways, long line of different features, different events, different things, underworld games, AI games, trying to plummet whatever's left of the ones with Pleiadian genetics, connected them to the Orion system through a series of AI interfacing, intervention, interacting potentials using the backdoor of the Pleiadian genetics, going back to the Orion Pleiadian wars. Overcoming many of the light children, the crystal children, they're supposed to keep the light of our planet. And we saw that in 18 and 19, where more and more of these military projects that were supposed to be the light towers turned into the proponents of the highest level of dark conspiracy theories, and all got engaged in that one. And with that opened up the doors for forces of AI that took them over and began to ran them in different sequences of some pretty shitty programs, from which I have also been played to a large degree in 18, and have seen what that is and what that does to your energy system. And if you don't know how to clean out AI, you will be consumed by these forces, and people will know a lot. They will think they have activated, but they are just been sucked into a virtual reality of some really serious series of events, of visions and things that are unfolding into their energy system, slowly but surely contaminating them and infecting them. Contamination is on the heart field, infection is on the brain field, and eventually turning them into little speakers and holders of darkness and the dark forces, and connected them to the Dark Avatar Collective. The underworld forces have done the same thing during the 2019-2020-21 event, as we know, running rampant on the planet, and everybody had got their what we call, I call it painted blue, so we don't get any trouble. And with that one, linking them up to the transhuman agenda, because that's the game that's going on with the underworld forces. They are playing these one up to the surface using the 2-8 pillar underworld second cycle racial grids to activate that one into humans, and then humans get painted blue and they get all linked up to different forms of nanotech and host fields, and by that are taken over by the greys and the humanoids under that type of parallel universal structure or universal matrix structure that is left, from where they will become part of the transhuman world. So that's the one that is turning people that way. When they are afraid of dealing with the underworld forces, they end up being sucked into the transhuman world instead, because they are fearful of their lives and will rather use technology and nanotech than actually doing the true clearing work and figure out what actually is going on. So that is again that group that will be pushed there. Here on, actually today on June 22nd, on the solstice, we had a massive earthquake in the Afghanistan border to Pakistan area. And that's where we have a very, very old gate that has now been activated into the second cycle. And with that one, things are coming up. It keeps coming up. I keep trying to take it out, but I can't, because it's massive. It's the entire 2-8 cycle that has now been opened up into this reality. And with that, whatever's been beneath, as they attempted in the 9/11 event, which led to the fall of different groups in America, and the whole fight against terror and all these kind of things. Anyways, it's too complicated to get into, because we have now opened up literally the gates to the old worlds that most of you know as the Babylonian secret reality that many have no ideas of what it is. It's not connected to the underworld of Egypt. That's a gate that will not be open, even though they did try it with the Egyptian spring and all the things that happened there. But that gate is so damaged that it cannot be opened. But the one that is in that Afghanistan, Pakistan area is not damaged, and it is of a different alien origin, which is technically not planetary, but it is connected to the second cycle. So they have opened that one up. Where it's connected to, I don't know. And to be honest, I don't really care. The matter of the fact is that it is. And with that one, we have gone under the minimum requirement of viability, because humans that have the genetic feature that matches these underworld forces will now be consumed by these forces, and that will be, of course, what we will face in from now on and until winter time and the winter solstice, where we will reach the low of the year, and that's why we will battle with whatever that will lead to of physical effects, which we will classify and call disease. So that is what we are heading. We had the same issue during the Middle Ages, but we got it closed back then. This is not possible because the falling angelics and the ones that were fighting effectively with us during these wars with these forces have left the building as well. They pulled out a while back following what we call the assassination of Heliel, or Lucifer as he's known. He was taken out by the Dark Avatar Collective. So we lost that one. And with that, I had also, when they left, what was left of what we call the good angelic forces that were stuck on the different timelines, pulled out along with the solar riches. So you kind of see everybody's leaving. The good guys are leaving. So this is not the falling angelics, but they could at least have the dark forces have from time to time teamed up with the good forces if it were in their interest. Anyways, they played for a game that they lost, and they are now pulled out. And that means we're just left with the shit of the shit. So that has sounded the second horn, and that sounded in times of Lemuria, and that sounded in Atlantis. And that's why we go into the last phase, where we had the first activation where everybody's invited to the party. And everybody gets the chance in these 23 years, which we had from 1999 until now. Everybody had a chance. Everybody got the information. It was out there on YouTube. It was given. It was taught. It was shared. It was worked with. And we didn't succeed. That's a fact, because now the second horn has sounded, and that means now we are opening up to the second cycle, and the what is stuck there and what is hidden in these different grids and racial networks. And with that one, it will affect humanity and efficiently begin to alter humans as we know of it. So therefore, the second horn has sounded, and that means those of us who did what we're supposed to do in the first 23 years, we are now being effectively transferred, mostly by our own means, because we are ready due to the laws of energetic and genetic affinity. We are now being pulled correctly, saying transferred, pulled via our own work, via the viability in our energy system to the timelines that still hold viability in the fifth cycle, from where we will now play the next 23 years to clean up and shut down and activate and whatever we need to do in the fifth cycle before we do the last horn that goes with the what we call the sixth cycle out, or the first cycle of the beginning. And this is where it gets complicated to understand that the third cycle played on the ones that were supposed to leave the fourth cycle. The second cycle plays on the ones that are supposed to leave the fifth cycle, and the first cycle or the sixth cycle plays on the ones that got stuck in the first cycle. So this is where at the beginning and the end meets up, and everything is closed up nicely, because things are not moving linearly but in a spiral way. So that was the 2-8 pillar is completed by working on that level, but the intersection point is the fifth cycle. That's where you get out. The 3-9 pillar, the intersection point there, is the fourth cycle where you get out there. The 1-7 pillar, the intersection point, is the sixth cycle where you get out there. So again, these are complicated dynamics for those who do not have the sight and the hearing. It cannot be taught, because these are things you just know per intuition. It's part of your template structure. It's activating, giving you this knowledge so you know where to go, how to play, what to deal with, how to clean up, and how to do what you need to do. But we will still have mentors. We are no longer teachers. That's the first horn where we teach. In the second, after the second horn has sounded, the ones that began the work but did not get there, the laggards, but have the potentials, they will now be mentored, guided, or advised to do what they need to do. They will no longer be taught, because that must come from within. That's what the second horn is saying. You should know this by now, because it's part of your heart field. And if you don't get the information from within, you do not have the vibrational state that is necessary for you to do the transition anyways. So knowledge cannot be given anymore. It can only be shared in a manner that comes in forms as mentoring, advising, which should lead the people that have the remaining potentials to do what they need to do, because they can now see it. You see, the first horn, when that sounded, people could not see it. They did not know what was going on, because they did not have the perception level to understand it, but they followed the pull because it was in their hearts. They knew this was the right thing to do, but they didn't know why. And that was the activation and cleanup, to follow the why with the knowledge that they already had and that were activated, to understand that and build the brain field. So the brain field is the second horn, where the ones that are now moving into the fifth cycle, we will begin our potentials to activate these and clean them up. And the horn is literally a horn. It's similar to when you go through every month you have on the 20th, you go through the light gates where you work with your radiation field that goes with the heart field to work with light there, interestingly enough, because it's kind of, light is supposed to be on the brain field, right? Because that's radiation, and vibration, sound is supposed to be on the heart field, right? But this is again where we have the triggery, because only the ones that have activated their heart field correctly will hear the horns, because it's vibration. And vibration goes with the heart field, and it tells you now You're done there. The second horn is sounded. You have completed the heart field cycle. Now you move into the brain field, and the third horn will be given as codes. It will no longer be a horn. It will be codes, but the codes will have a sound, and only the ones that can perceive light in the correct manner will see the codes, and by that hear the sounds in their heart, from where they will do the final transition out of this system. And that will be in 46 years. So that's, or in 23 years when that one is done. Then when we completed that one in 46 years, and there we're kind of ending up what we could call the whole process of this reality somewhere around 2033 when we are done. Then the ones that have the correct codes and our ability to see codes and see light and hear sound, they will be the ones that will be sucked out, again due to the laws of energetic and genetic affinity, to the restoration program. So that's what the horns and the sounds are all about. These are the cycles that will pull us where we need to go when we need to go there. So in the next video, I'll go in and we'll talk a little bit about the activation and cleanup stages one more time, as we have done so many times now. But again, it serves our purpose to repeat over and over again, because this is where I kind of say, well, the Template Science course 2 is kind of where we put what we knew from the original program into the next stage of our developmental journey. But this now I can only mentor you. I can only advise you to what you should do by sharing this last course, where I will teach in the classical manner under the progression dynamics with the original Pillar Project Sciences, what they were made of, and I'm more or less just explaining the sciences than teaching the sciences. And this is, again, I put out material for the 2025 Forerunners into the 5th cycle, and there we will have a period of time, the next 7 years, where we can share this information, which some will of course understand as being taught. But technically, the sciences are never taught, they are explained, but that's not the same as teaching. Teaching leads from sciences to implementation. When you're a good teacher, you know how to explain the sciences, but also give examples from where it can be implemented. From now on, you can only give the sciences, because that also goes with the radiation field or the brain field and the perception level, that these levels of information cannot be taught, because this is something that is now going on a level where the information systems are so complex that only portions of it can be exemplified in an explanation, but the rest must be discovered by the persons themselves. The rest of the pattern must be for them to figure out how to activate using the original and correct dynamics of their heart field. So this is part of it as well. You can only give, this is the beginning point of this pattern, but the rest of the pattern you can only see if you know how to vibrate it up, working with this information or working with this information the correct way. And that's part of the developmental programs, and that goes with the perception field, knowing how to activate these different levels of the developmental programs. And that, of course, goes with the rotundum, but the rotundum is technically connected to the heart field. So in the brain field, that's interesting enough where the constellations technically play in, but what we have got of astrology is now so distorted that we cannot use that. So we need to use another schematics, another type of agent to teach us or share this information with us, from where we can access the holographic teaching system and get the interactive programs that will share this information with us from within due to our genetics and what we need to develop. But more of that in the next video. Thank you.